and this was the one that I originally shared with the Game B group. And it's
Ooh,
basically this. Say that again?
You made the graphics yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Really cool. I like it.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of overlap in the way that we visualize things. Like,
Yeah,
this is
I
one of
love
the
it.
things about Project
Yeah,
Liminality.
yeah. Even the
And
colors are like congruent.
yeah, good point. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, what this was trying to point towards is that I feel like there's this potential where, just to quickly summarize, like this is meant to kind of represent the economy, and each circle is like represents a company. So you have lots of small companies and then larger companies and then conglomerates, which actually include multiple child companies and kind of are coordinated into almost like a super organism of their own. But red represents that they're privately owned, they're opaque, people can't see, how money is flowing, how they're organized. They're kind of very concentrated power, kind of dictatorial, and also not really accountable to the wider collective body. So, like Facebook or these other companies, like we have very little say as the citizens of the world, even though this system, you could view it as like an organ. For the collective body, it's performing this important role for the body, but the body has no say over it. It's kind of selfishly organized. And then blue is this kind of idea of these organizations that are have these different values. So they're cooperatively owned, they're transparent, democratic, and accountable to the wider population.
Yeah.
And I guess the trajectory that I was seeing is that, like, you often have this process where a company will form, say something like Google, where they start off with a very niche service. Like they basically started off and they figured out how to do a good search engine. It was just very simple initially. But once they were successful in that market, suddenly there's this inflow of capital. And those resources then enable the company to start expanding. And initially they'll just expand and kind of dominate their initial industry. But if money keeps flowing in, they keep generating surplus, then eventually it strategically makes sense for them to start diversifying, where they start to invest in other branches and other industries. And they start to become this kind of super organism. And you'd see that like with Amazon's another example. It started off just selling books, and now it's like become, it hosts most of the internet, and it's like, they've got all their TV shows, and like they branch out into all these different things. And Google's the same, Facebook's the same. Like once you become successful enough, you start to branch out into things. But the problem is that every time this growth trajectory has happened so far, it's happened under private ownership and this kind of dictatorial governance structure. And basically the insight for me is that I feel like that same trajectory, that growth trajectory, could be realized, but under this radically different governance system.
Yes.
So I was kind of imagining it as like the seed would be a social network, because there's a bunch of advantages. Like one, scaling a social network is a lot easier than scaling a lot of other types of companies, because like once you've got the code, it can actually, you can scale it to very large very quickly at relatively low cost compared to other industries. It also, social networks hold this potential for collective intelligence, which I feel like is really key to enabling cooperative governance, because it is a challenge. How do you govern a system effectively when there's lots of people involved? But the potential I see is like that if we develop this social stack and it had baked in these values, it was very transparent, it was very holistic, and it was all cooperatively owned, that it could realize the same trajectory. So if it gained success in that initial market, if people were like, actually, this is better than Facebook or whatever, then it could start to actually generate quite a bit of revenue. And that would then enable it to start this growth process where, the collective intelligence of all the people using the platform could then be used to figure out like, what are the other organizations out there that like really align with our mission, but are maybe struggling for funding in their own area. Well, we can, offer to give them support. And if they end up generating a load of revenue, maybe there's some agreement where some of that flows back to this system. And basically this thing could just start expanding and expanding. And to me, it seems like a potential way to instantiate new, like there's multiple dimensions. Like one is that it could enable this a new form of democracy to evolve that, like, I feel like we're just going to really struggle to get that pushed forward in the current political system. Like it feels like we need to develop that independently, and this could provide the substrate for experimenting with large scale global democracy and collective intelligence and stuff like that.
Yes.
The other side of it is that we're in a very unequal world where enormous amounts of capital are concentrated to small groups of people, and it's not being used very wisely. And if this system really started to grow, potentially it could even outcompete some of the massive tech giants. And then this enormous pool of funds could be won over for the collective body, or for humanity. So these funds could flow into this kind of central pot, and then all people all around the world could be voting each year, like, we should be spending it on this regenerative work, or there's this really great charity that's doing important work, like, and people could be proposing things, and that money could then be, instead of being concentrated, it could start being redistributed. It's just this, to me, it feels like this potential trajectory that could end up starting to really address some of the deep problems of the meta crisis.
Yeah, 100%. And so you had these thoughts before you discovered Gambi?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Great. Because because that is exactly like the very first impression I got from Gambi, is like Gambi is basically cooperation, like cooperation, out competing competition, right? Like that is like
exactly.
the big thing. And that innovation, like all the good stuff, will come from this new way of doing things. And so there's no struggle needed. Like we don't need a Gambi doesn't need a military force or something like that. Because Moloch will just, like, the cells out of which Moloch is composed, they will just be like, okay, let's go over there. Like all the good stuff is happening there. Like it's a loose to climb the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Like a thought that feels relevant here is that I think platform is something to be overcome as well, because like I heard this so often now from Forrest and kind of like Forrest Landry and people around him, that these honeypot dynamics, it's like Forrest is hyper focused and aware of this kind of predatory dynamics sneaking in. To some degree, I feel like it's a bit too much sometimes. But now the more I see that we really can build stuff where there's no honeypot, it's obvious to me that we should do it. And one of the things is going from platform to protocol, where it's more like email or something like that. It's just a way of communicating and organizing that has no center, which is much more in line of, how reality metaphysically is structured, and also how nature works. Like it's just like it's much more congruent with the universal laws kind of governing everything. And this, which is one of the things, like getting in resonance with the way nature really works, and not just our kind of fear-based understanding that we project onto it, kind of selfish gene type of things, but more like a mystical understanding almost of what nature really is. Getting in resonance with that, I think that is like going to, outcompete everything, but more like dissolve it without even feeling any resistance. That's kind of what I see. And then like one thing that comes to that is, I think framing in terms of economics and, like the topologically or structurally, like the Google example is a great example. But I think it's also very important to not be too attached to kind of the expression of that example, which is like a company competing in the market with money, like financial capital and stuff like that. But to kind of take it as a finger pointing to some more general moon, which is just maybe a way to put it is like they had asymmetric. Daniel Schmachberger talks about this, like Moloch uses asymmetry to increase asymmetry, like across the board. I'm richer
Mhm.
and I use my money to become richer. I'm more
Mhm.
powerful, I use it to become more powerful. And you don't have to tie it to any one expression, but it's just this underlying thing. So the other side uses asymmetry to decrease asymmetry, basically, like the Robin Hood type of dynamic,
Mhm.
but like abstracting it to all forms of capital. And here I want to invoke like the GameStop miracle. Like they did something that didn't require funding because people brought in like energy, created memes, stuff like that. And as well, if that would have matured more, this could also be a way to get a lot of financial capital,
Mhm.
which does not require the traditional route. It's basically like
Yeah.
a super intelligent. Like, why are people afraid of AI? Yeah, because it will figure out ways. Like it will figure out these gaping holes between all the rules that we set up that we are not intelligent enough to see, but it will see it, and it will beat us in this game in ways that we can't even imagine. But well, collective super intelligence is like that, but times 10,000. So basically, like the idea, we don't have to be too attached to exactly how that path looks like, but the direction is clear. That's kind of like some thoughts that come up because like there's crazy stuff. I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if I sent it to you, but I posted it on Wiki like the stuff about the In Power movement.
Oh yeah,
Where
I looked briefly into that. Yeah, it seemed kind of
uh,
interesting. I didn't quite understand fully how it worked, but yeah, it did seem interesting.
it's very like you have to be very conspiratorial minded to be open to that.
Mhm.
But like in a nutshell, a few months back, the Queen of Denmark advocated the throne, officially just because she felt not healthy and stuff, but apparently because the In Power movement used some very old set of laws that only very few people on this planet are still aware of, like generationally monopolized knowledge in powerful families. They discovered that and they used it to kind of sue her out of that. It's a longer story, and I'm still very new to this. It's just an example of one of these things, like the AGI or ASI, like super intelligence, will figure that out, right? It will read through all the documents and understand, oh, these people don't see that there's much more wiggle room in the law.
Mhm.
But we can do the same. And yeah, so just that.